His Excellency Tun Mahathir Mohamad, Tun Siti, Ambassador Shri Hasmu Agam, and representatives from all over the world, citizens of Malaysia. We are not dealing with an abstract or technical question here with reference to the events of 9/11. Millions have been sacrificed at the altar of this false flag operation. And the rule of law and the Constitution of the United States of America has ceased to exist. The United States is no longer a democracy or a republic. And this is evident from the nature of legislative and executive measures that were put in place immediately following 9/11. On the capitulation of the alternative political system of the former Soviet Union and the socialist bloc countries, the United States and NATO powers required a new enemy. Without manufacturing a new enemy, it was not possible to marshal the public opinion of the United States, citizens of the United States and the world, for a new world war, a new global war, which is in fact a world war. If you look at the nature of theaters and the number of countries who have been singled out for attack. This new enemy, ironically, were simple adherents of the Islamic faith, which is the only religion in the world which has raised peace to a new height. As the Muslim people and the religious movement is termed Islam. However, the governments of some members of the organization of the Islamic Conference were collaborators, I'm ashamed to say that, in the demonizing of their own people. And here you find the collaboration was in the formation of the Al-Qaeda. I do not credit the administration or the government of the United States with any deep reading of literature, philosophy, or Arabic. And here we find this organization called the Al-Qaeda, or the base, is treated as the new enemy after 9/11, and it appears and disappears like a phantom organization, with certain governments claiming that this organization does exist, and the intelligence agencies of some of the countries of the Organization of Islamic States funding an underworld of CIA funded and financed trained terrorists who shift base from country to country depending on which country is to be targeted for attack or where regime change is urgently required. And this is what is known as the global war on terror, when in fact it was terrorism, global war, a terrorist war against the people of the world, including the people of the United States, who were very slow, considering the monopoly of their corporations over the media, to understand what exactly were the implications of this so-called war on terror. That the enemy was not the Al-Qaeda, which was a creation of the United States government collaborating with certain countries of the Organization of Islamic Conference. The enemy was not only the people of Afghanistan, the people of Libya, the people of Iraq, the people of Yemen, the people of Palestine. The enemy, ironically, were the citizens of the United States themselves, as in the context of the collapsing financial corporations, financial institutions, banks and corporations, of which we have evidence that immediately after 9/11, you have Enron collapsing. It was a bubble corporation. You have the entire civil aviation sector needing subsidies. And from 2001 till date, you have this absolutely fantastic financial phenomena unknown in the financial history of the world, and in particular at the contemporary financial period, where you have quantitative easing programs to recycle money into collapsing banks and financial institutions, with sovereign debt crisis affecting practically all the countries of NATO and, of course, the United States of America. So it was this scenario which required a new enemy, as the resources of countries were to be seized. Hydrocarbons, national budgets, the deposits of the governments in Western banks have also been seized, whether it's funds and deposits of the government of Iraq, the government of Libya, the government of Iran. All have been seized in an act of financial terror. And this was the fear syndrome. A former president of Pakistan, General Musharraf, said, and he even wrote, that he was told that if you do not collaborate in this war of terror which we are waging, we will bomb you into the Stone Age. This is the level of so-called diplomacy. And what is worse, governments across the board were complicit in this diplomacy. Government to government was sending condolences to the government of the United States without asking for an investigation and inquiry, when it was prima facie clear that this was a false flag operation and had nothing to do with Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya or Syria or Iran or any one of these countries. Ironically, Professor Choudhury has correctly mentioned that a judge in the United States has passed an order saying the Al-Qaeda is connected with Iran. This indicates that every institution in the United States, whether it's the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, are all collaborators in this charade which they are using to deprive the citizens of the United States of every single democratic right. Because anyone who has understood and observed the events in Afghanistan is aware that Iranian diplomats were brutally attacked by the Taliban in Afghanistan. So how can there be a connection between Iran and the Al-Qaeda? It's all absurd. And Iran was a part of the Northern Alliance. This is the absurdity to which we have come. The global media and the US media has played a very important role in creating a false fear syndrome across the world. I do not know about other countries, but in my country, the corporate-owned media continues the war on terrorism, and it has continued for every single day since 2001 till date. And similar is the situation in the United States, and a similar situation exists in many parts of the world. That day in and day out, we have this Goebbelsian propaganda that there is a war on terror, and the terrorists are adherents of the Islamic faith. Till, of course, in India, we recently discovered that there was an extreme right-wing organization which had placed bomb blasts. They were not adherents of the Islamic faith. Of course, the senior police officer who investigated the connections of this right-wing organization and funding from Israel and Zionist sources was assassinated immediately after he completed the investigation in the famous so-called attack on Mumbai, which took place 3 years ago. So this is the reality of the so-called war on terror and the fear syndrome which has been created. It is important for us to understand what happened to those stars. Sitting as a judge in Tokyo for the International Criminal Tribunal in Afghanistan, we heard some very interesting testimony, including of 2 citizens of the United States of America. One had lost his companion in the World Trade Center Tower 1. And he said he found it difficult to accept because he had this cell phone conversation with his companion. And she told him that people are rushing to safety, but we have been told to stay in the tower. And he testified that those who rushed immediately and got to safety were saved. Those, like his companion who remained in the tower, died on that day. We also had testimony from a journalist, Press Workers Union, who said that immediately as the incident took place, rather than any focus on investigation and inquiry, there was a demand, there was a war hysteria created immediately as the incident took place, which also makes it clear that the focus was not on the rescue operations, on the need to examine the situation, but it was a pre-planned event that with the onset of this incident, a war hysteria is to spread throughout the United States of America, and patriotism. I recall a friend who was visiting the United States and who returned to tell me that the USA had started resembling what Nazi Germany must have looked like. At the time of the Third Reich, flags were out. There were talk of nothing but patriotism and the so-called enemy. The kind of atrocities which have been visited on citizens far exceeds possibly even the nature of destruction which Nazi Germany had perpetrated. This is because the weapons in use are far more advanced for destruction than were in the Second World War. And 80 to 90% of the targets are all civilians. This is a war on the civilian population of the world to break their will to resist war. And it is a war on people of the United States to break their will to struggle against and to restore the Constitution of the United States, which is the immediate agenda. If you look at the situation of drone warfare, and there is a report, a very agonizing report from Pakistan, because they have been the main victims of drone warfare, apart from Yemen, and of course this is going to spread. It's already there in the Horn of Africa, in Somalia. And this is what this report, Living Under Drones, Death, Injury and Trauma to Citizens from US Drones Attack, states. The human nightmare is the aim of US imperialism. They are aware of the hostility among the population towards its goals, and therefore tries to assert its power and subdue any kind of resistance by spreading terror and keeping people in a constant state of fear. The Minister for Internal Security of Pakistan had to raise the issue that despite over 336 drone sorties, hardly 20 so-called militants on a list were the subject of attack. The rest were all children and women, so much so that children have stopped going to school in the tribal areas of northwest Pakistan. The parents have said that we do not know whether the child will return with will be alive. We are not going to send our children to school. They are being terrorized by these drone attacks. And what kind of attacks? You cannot even bury the body. You cannot find the body because the limbs are distributed over a large area. This is the nature of attack. Apart from thermobaric weapons being used, there are reports of small nukes having been used, of course bunker busters, of course white phosphorus which is being used in Israel, in Palestine, in Gaza, and talking about the fear syndrome. If we have to learn what is freedom from fear and what is courage under attack, there is only one people who can teach us. That is after the Vietnamese, and that is the people of Palestine who are holding out steadfastly despite the fact that there is no assistance coming from any part of the world. This is the nature of the fear syndrome which these valiant people are holding out to, whereas the rest of us appear to have succumbed to. As after 9/11, fear has been institutionalized. Internally in the United States and globally, there is no international law globally. It is only the institutionalization of fear with the Security Council resolutions as a fig leaf. And the recent example is Syria, where if you cannot effect regime change because the people do not want a regime change. So therefore, you unleash terrorists in the name of some kind, you use some kind of an Arabic term or the other to call them as mujahidins or jihadis or whatever they are referred to. And these are infiltrated as a matter of state terrorist policy into countries. And then these resolutions are passed in the Security Council asking that the government of Syria step down. We have reached a stage where heads of state are also being terrorized. And of course, His Excellency Tun Mahathir Mohamad is fortunately sitting safe before us, because he is not the Prime Minister at the moment of Malaysia. And if he had talked about what he's been talking about much before any head of state, and therefore I really respect him, that is the whole issue of this global reserve currency and the fact that financially, internationally, the world is being defrauded. But had he talked about this in this period of time, he would have been subject to regime change or maybe something worse. As a meeting has been held, recently a meeting was held in Doha, where the Qatari representative was urging the Israeli representative to assassinate President Assad and with the support of the United States, and the consideration of quid pro quo which was to be given was free gas to Israel from Qatar. Free gas and petroleum supplied at a reasonable rate. This is where it is questionable. Governments who are declaring themselves fraudulently as countries with an Islamic culture, Islamic civilization, where Islam is the state religion, are misusing their own religion and culture to participate in this kind of a collaboration, which we are now seeing, which is equally responsible for the state of terror in the Palestinian homeland and in the Arab world. These are the issues with which we are confronting. And what about the complete destruction of the infrastructure of countries invaded and occupied? Since when is water, sanitation, housing military targets? This is the fear syndrome, that you teach a population that it must not resist. Despite which, can the United States tell us that it has won a victory, either in Iraq or in Afghanistan or anywhere else? Can it tell us? And not even in Libya, where the most atrocious bombing operations were carried out, even as we pay tribute to the courage of the late President Gaddafi. We must understand the difference between what happened in Libya. Immediately after Iraq was attacked, Colonel Gaddafi was persuaded by his eldest son, Saif al-Islam, to initiate negotiations with the NATO and the Western world. So he funded the French elections, he funded the Italian elections. Then thereafter, he tried to establish normalcy with the UK, with the United States. Former Prime Minister Tony Blair, who's a declared war criminal by the KL Tribunal, visited Libya. What happened? Was that enough? He re-established trade relations, opened up the oil fields, made different gestures, wound up his nuclear energy and armament program. In fact, Libya disarmed completely, invited inspections. Did that save President Gaddafi? And in the annals of world history, I have not come across a statement which speaks for itself on the matter which we are discussing here. And the statement is, we came, we saw, and he died. Thank you.